History, history. Can you see, little boy, what you mean to me? Can you see how sweet our love has long grown to be? It's time to see the happiness I feel inside of me. Knowing one thing, darling, this love will always be two lovers, history. Ain't that two lovers, history? Peaches and cream, candy.
Welcome to episode 22 of the History Boys Abroad's. Under the lens on this episode is the first goalkeeper that we've ever covered. He's one of Celtic's most famous sons, and the month of February is the month where pilgrimages happen and dedications pour in. His name is John Thomson, also known as the Prince of Goalkeepers. With me in this podcast is the usual voice of Bogota-based, but an original pappy from Drumchapel, Gary. Gary, how are you?
Not too bad. So yourself?
I'm not bad, mate. I do apologise.
Mammy, I suppose I should call you.
I do apologise for that blind date style intro that I've just given you there, but aye. Anyway, so first question to you, Gary. We're going to talk about John Thomson tonight. This is the reason that we've arranged to have this podcast. What did you know of John Thomson prior to the research?
Not a great deal. Most of the kind of stuff that you know of John Thomson, for me, the thing that always stands out is the image. It just seems quite timeless. In part of my research, I was kind of looking. He's got a kind of James Dean type of quality in terms of the Celtic story. When you consider that, without giving too much away, he obviously the tragic way that his career at Celtic ended, and it's just that image. In any kind of history thing that you see of Celtic or any video or so on, that image just kind of pops up. So in terms of his life and career, not a great deal. Just more about the kind of tragic circumstances his career finished.
Yeah, I think everyone knows the name. Anyone that follows Celtic on a kind of normal fanatic level, I guess, knows the name John Thomson. However, they would probably struggle to pinpoint the decade where he was a Celtic player. He was a very, very good Celtic player, and obviously the decade where he passed away. And I admit to being in that camp, I would have said maybe the 40s or 50s, but we're going to be talking about the 1920s and then the mid 1920s and the very, very early 1930s. So I'm going to start for the first couple of years of his career and a little bit about his life and his upbringing. So first of all, he was born on the 28th of January 1909 in Kirkcaldy, but then moved to a small mining village called Cardendon. I couldn't really work out how to pronounce it, but it's Cardendon, when he was very young with his family. Now, Cardendon is a tiny village. Back then it was tiny. Now it's only 5,000 or 6,000 people. I'd imagine even back then when John and his family moved there, it was even smaller. Typical Fife mining village. Such was the way back then. John started his life as a miner, which again is a common thing that was a common type of job that was popular within Scotland at that time, and certainly up until the 60s, 70s and 80s and so forth. So the town he actually grew up in was also the birthplace of Ian Rankin, and I think there's a couple of other relatively famous people that came from there, but I'm going to move on. So I've got a quote from the actual Wikipedia, not the Bible-like Celtic Wikipedia, and I'm unsure of the authenticity of this, but I'm just going to read this verbatim, and just to let people know that are listening, there's going to be a lot of quotes in this, so bear with us, and we'll explain why later. So at the age of 14, he became an on-cost worker at Bowhill Colliery. I can't even pronounce that. However, essentially basically means he was working within oil in the mines, where his father also worked. He worked 300 yards below the pit head surface, uncoupling the chain clips of the wagons that carried the coal up from the mine. During the 1924-25 season, Thomson played for Bowhill Rovers. The following season, he moved to Wellesley Juniors, where his talent was spotted by the local press, who predicted that he would become a very good goalkeeper in the future. little did they know that he would become a guy that was being spoken about 95, 96, 97 years later, close to 100 years later. Him being an absolute icon for Celtic, and also a Celtic legend, and also a part of the Scottish Football Hall of Fame, which we're going to talk about in a wee bit. So he basically signs for Celtic at the age of 17 in 1926. Now, up until this point, Celtic had won 17 leagues in 11 Scottish Cups. But as things go with this podcast, we have a habit of talking about people through darker times, and this certainly was one of the darker times. This decade of the 20s, where Celtic only picked up sort of scraps off the back of the Huns basically running riot that decade, but that's how it goes. So he signed for Celtic age 17. He was a keeper, as I say, for Wellesley Juniors. They don't really seem to exist anymore, but he was signed by a specific scout that I'm going to talk about in a wee minute, who was also the scout that I think he was the scout that brought in Jimmy McGrory. Now, see, when we were doing the research for this, Gary, like when I'm reading this and I'm doing all the looking at the games and stuff like that, Jimmy McGrory's fucking absolutely ridiculous. Like, I know that it's a different game of football and all that then, but Jesus, the guy was an absolute warlord.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the research that I'd looked at, he's just, I mean, it's an era where, you know, most teams seem to score a lot of goals anyway. I think one of the seasons that I saw, one of the teams got relegated, but they still scored a fair amount of goals. But they went down because they conceded 113 of them. So but even in those kind of eras, McGrory just kind of stands out. He's just the top scorer for Celtic every single year, and it's just remarkable. Not only the volume of goals he scored, but his consistency as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure that somewhere down the line we will do a McGrory podcast that would probably need to be split into one or two. But he's someone that his ruthlessness in front of goal needs to be dissected and chopped up. And I guess we're probably the most likely podcast to do something like that. So I'd be happy to do that in the future. So I think with John Thomson, I only read on one source. I've had two books out this week. I've had the Celtic History and the Essential Celtic History both. One's commissioned by the club, the other one's, I think, an independent one, along with the variety of Celtic Wiki website, the Kerrydale Street, various other online books and yada, yada, yada. I came across one thing that said that John Thomson played for Ayr United on loan from Celtic, but only one place said it, so it may be true. I couldn't really, verify it. But anyway, so apparently that he never actually signed a piece of paper for his contract. So when this scout, who I'll speak about in a minute, goes to see him, the scout was actually going to see another keeper in the same game who was playing against John Thomson's team, playing for another team. The scout was actually going to see someone else and noticed John Thomson, and the rest was kind of history. But apparently never signed a piece of paper for his contract. Have you any idea what he signed?
I'll have a guess. A napkin.
A napkin? No, that was Messi, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
Messi signed a napkin, but
well, if it's Messi, you need a napkin.
Aye, well, this is a very good point. This is why we do it, not only for the research that I do, but for your absolute witty character, Gary. So well done.
Yeah.
That's the drum chapel, and you mate. So apparently, like that, I only found this in one of these sources, but it was the lid of an old fuse box at the side of the road. He went for a tram ride with the scout after playing the game. Went for a chat in the tram, and apparently he signed just like a piece of plastic or something like that at the side of a road, which I thought was pretty mental, to be honest. But it's probably true because back then I don't imagine pens and paper were readily available.
I think anything we seem to do seems to uncover these wee little tidbits, and you just kind of wonder, and I suppose it's probably a lot of people. The scout himself was probably, I need to get his signature on something. It probably wouldn't have been legally binding, but I don't think people really had access to good advice on stuff like law and stuff like that. So I just don't think that anyone. I think they just needed to get his signature on something. And that was the closest thing to hand.
Aye, I would agree with that, and I guess it just makes the signee feel a bit more important. It makes him feel a bit more official. But signing the lid of a fuse box is ripping the arse, to be honest. Enough of my shite questions. So the scout, let's talk about the scout. The Prince of Talent Scouts. This was by Sir Robert Kelly. This is from a newspaper clipping. Steve Callaghan was probably the Prince of Talent Scouts. He came to prominence in the early 1920s when he guided the junior St Anthony's to success after success. Celtic, managed by the famous Willie Maley, signed 3 of their stars, Tommy McInally, John Gilchrist and Johnny Mackay, and at the same time, I'm trying to read this, it's a very small paper clipping, induced Steve to become chief scout for the club. During his long association with Celtic, which lasted until comparatively recent years when failing health forced him to retire, he was instrumental in bringing great and famous players to Celtic Park. On one occasion, he travelled to Fife to watch and, if satisfied, to sign a prominent junior centre forward. So he was given the responsibility by Willie Maley and the Whites, who were in control of Celtic at the time, the White family, that if you thought this guy was suitable to play for Celtic, then sign him on the spot, and the rest was history. So on his return, Mr. Maley asked him if he'd signed the player. Steve replied, "No, I didn't. I didn't sign the centre, but I did sign a goalkeeper. The boy he signed that day was the great John Thomson." Steve Callaghan was highly respected by everyone in the game because of his quiet, unassuming manner and his unfailing courtesy to players and officials alike. So this is the guy that brought Celtic to John Thomson and John Thomson to Celtic, and he's also involved with some other players from St Anthony's, who were the Govan-based team that were kind of a feeder club to Celtic at one point, and also he had a hand in signing the world-famous James McGrory. So the team in 1926-1927 was Thomson, Shevlin was the other goalkeeper, McStay, Hilly, Wilson, another McStay, it was Willie McStay and Jimmy McStay, McFarlane, Connolly, Thomson, McInally, McMenemy and McLean. Any idea how much Celtic paid for John Thomson, Gary?
Probably had to fix the fuse box, but I don't know, 50 quid?
10.
Tenner, there you go, mate.
10 spot.
Bargain.
10 spot. Get a munchie box for that these days at a tenner. I actually calculated the price of the money then, with through the inflation today, it was £558. £558 for a goalkeeper. I guess by then, even with inflation, that money goes a long, long way. We're talking early 20s, mid 20s, and a wee guy who's coming from a tiny poke a wee pokey little place in Fife, a little mining, like Rolling Hills type place, industrial little mining village surrounded by the countryside. It would have been a lot of money, but he was only 18. The previous goalkeeper, just to give a bit of information about the guy that he replaced in the circumstances, throughout Celtic's season 1926-1927, the goalkeeper was called Peter Shevlin. I said that a moment ago. He was a few years older than Thomson, but he'd shipped 3 soft goals in the previous game, which Celtic won 6-3 away. Celtic had won 6-3 to Brecon, so Celtic scored 6 goals, and the guy let in 3. We still won the game comfortably, and then Willie Maley decided to drop him. This was in February. He never conceded a single goal in December, but shipped well over 20 goals, and we'd lost a fair amount of games over the course of the season, which was until that point, which I'm talking about, was February, where we're about to talk about the February the 12th. Celtic had won 32 points from a possible 46 up to this point in February, so his debut was on the 12th of February, as I say. A couple of days ago, Celtic had tweeted out about that. 12th of February against Dundee, Celtic 2, Dundee 1, 1927. The team: John Thomson, Willie McStay, Hugh Hilly, Peter Wilson, John Donoghue, Frank Doyle, Paddy Connolly, Alec Thompson, Jimmy McGrory, Tommy McInally, Adam McLean. Goals: Alec Thompson, and then the second goal by Jimmy McGrory. So I'm just going to read verbatim here from an article. Celtic get points at Dundee. Weakness at halfback to a large extent lost Dundee the points in their meeting with Celtic at Dens Park. Dundee had a large share of the play, but the strength of the Celts midline and the resource of their forwards eventually carried the day. Cook opened the scoring for Dundee in rather unexpected fashion 5 minutes before the interval. A high lobbing cross from the winger curling into the far corner of the net. Celtic were not long in finding the net when the second half began, Thompson netting from close range after 4 minutes. 10 minutes later, Celtic registered the winning goal through McGrory. Celtic was best served in attack, all 3 halfbacks being strong, while Connolly, McGrory and McInally were the pick of a penetrative front rank. The teams meet next week at Dundee in the 3rd round of the Scottish Cup. The attendance numbered 17,000. So basically, another quote, I'm just going to give some more quotes here. Apparently, this is from the Celtic history. The book I've got, it says, Thomson performed with panache for the remainder of the season. So the thing that I kept reading during this research that I was doing was that he was famous for his agility, his athleticism, and his courage. These were the attributes that carried him. And apparently, he was supposed to be a really nice guy, very, very quiet. During your research, like what sort of attributes did you come across? I guess they're going to be the same, but did you come across anything different?
Yeah, a few of the things that I saw, obviously, and obviously we'll revisit this towards the end, is that he was very, very brave. Didn't mind putting himself in harm's way, so to speak. Obviously, with towards the end, that's obviously the kind of reason that we're speaking about him. But also as well, I think we've got a few quotes as well. It's basically saying that he seemed to have craftsman hands, something along those lines, kind of artist hands. And just yeah, it seemed to be someone who was a natural goalkeeper, especially for the time that he kind of came up.
Almost like a revolutionary style goalkeeper that came in, and he caught the attention of Celtic fans instantly. He caught the attention of the support of obviously from the press because he was receiving a lot of plaudits. The following week, as I say, Celtic played Dundee and we beat them in the Scottish Cup. Celtic, just to fast forward a little bit, Celtic won the Scottish Cup this year. We beat East Fife, who were a second division team, Division 2 rather. We were in Division 1 where there were 20 teams, and it was quite a big deal for a smaller team from the second division, or Division 2 rather, to be in a Scottish Cup final, which was considered, obviously out with the league, it was considered the biggest trophy in Scotland. There's the Glasgow Cup, there's all these other types of cups, but the Scottish Cup was the main thing. The League Cup, Celtic never really won that for a long, long time, so that wasn't really something that we focused on. But the team that won against East Fife that day was John Thomson, Willie McStay, Hugh Hilly, Peter Wilson, Jimmy McStay, John McFarlane, Paddy Conley, Alec Thompson, Tommy McAnally, John McMenemy, Adam McLean, and the goals were McLean and Connolly. One name missing from that list, is Jimmy McGrory. So East Fife, as I say, big deal for them to be in there. It's the equivalent of like fucking I guess East Fife being in the Scottish Cup final. They're now all at the semi-finals or something. It's a big, big thing. So McGrory was injured. East Fife took the leads. Celtic pulled one back via an own goal, and then two further goals gave Celtic the victory. But John Thomson won his first ever trophy with Celtic. This was the the Scottish Cup final was the first ever trophy that he won as a Celtic player, and this was the first ever Scottish Cup final to be aired on the radio. So I'm going to continue on. John finished the season with 19 games, aged 18. Celtic came third in a league of 20 teams. The Huns beat us home and away. We only played them twice because of the nature of the large league. You play each team twice, once home, once away. You're lucky if you get in the cups because there's so many teams. The biggest win of the season was a 7-0 win versus Clyde. Jim McGrory scored 5. Jim McGrory scored 5 goals in 3 separate games and 4 goals in 3 other separate games that season. Guess how many he scored that season in total?
Is it 57?
Somebody's doing their research.
No, I generally didn't. I just knew that he had the record, and I knew the record was 57, and I thought this must be his record year.
Somebody's doing their research. That's it. So, I mean, we finished third in the league. We finished with 49 points. We only won 21 games and lost 10. But McGrory is just an absolute figurehead for the team. So around this time, there's quite a few murmurings in the books that I've read and the resources that I use for this podcast that say Celtic were content with letting some trophies go for a year or two. You know, they were quite happy to sit back and not, like, if they never won a trophy, the board this was, if they never won a trophy, it would be all right. In the hope that the youth system will eventually bloom and become successful. Do you believe this? Do you think this was the case?
I think that perhaps that kind of, yeah, I'd say so. I think that's the kind of mindset that I think that board had. One thing you can say is that they did always want to bring through young players, whatever the motive for that would be in terms of actually maybe just try to sell them on, make a bit of cash. I'm not sure, but I'd believe that that's kind of what they were happy with doing. That's probably why we didn't win a lot of the things perhaps we should have, because there perhaps wasn't that mentality running through the club. Maybe even up until Steen came in. Obviously, we had periods of success before then, but I think this kind of period, I can believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, And I'm going to give you. I mean, obviously, we talk about Celtic being skint or being tight all the time because we do all these different decades, and every decade seems to have the same sort of mindset with these guys in charge, whether it's the Kellys or the Whites, or it was under Fergus, or whatever it is. All these people were very frugal with their money, but it should be pointed out the Great War of the early 1900s, the First World War had happened, and this decade was like the immediate decade after. So there was a depression, there was poverty, which kind of bled into the mindset of the board, in my opinion. Like I was reading things like the player bonuses weren't being increased. Like guys who come in and signed a contract and done extremely well then went to the board at the end of the contract and say, I've done very, very well. Can I get a contract that's slightly better? And they were offered less than they already had. So it just seems like we've had this, the biscuit, the phrase that was always bandied around towards Celtic was the biscuit tin mentality, which when you read these back, you're kind of thinking it does have a lot of substance and it has a lot of roots. Like it stretches back 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, fair point about. I hadn't really thought about the time and the kind of world at large at this time as well. You could well be right there in terms of also as well to perhaps needed to reduce ticket prices and so on. But just knowing the mindset, I'm sure they probably milked that for all it was worth.
Yeah. I would think so too. I did read that Celtic. I don't know if you've come across, but Celtic did do a reduced gate for people. They did have like a section for people that couldn't afford to pay like the shilling or whatever it was. And I also read something that made me quite sad that there would be loads of people outside Celtic Park that just couldn't afford to go in, but they would stand outside and just listen, and they would listen to the game, but also wait there in vain to see if they would actually get a chance to like sneak in, or like someone would allow them to come in or pay them in. So there would be like the people that could afford to go in would pay their shillings and go into the stadium, whereas the people that couldn't would just like stand outside, which kind of fucking makes me feel very sad. But 1927, 1928, John makes 44 appearances. Now he's only just turning 19, so we start the season very, very well. We scored 30 goals in 10 games, and we're destroying a lot of teams. Like, and I've got a theory why, and I'll come to that theory. But we're destroying a lot of teams, but then we kind of get stopped in our tracks by a game against the Huns. The Huns just kind of stepped up and said no. Around about October 15th of 1927. So there is one massive result to talk about in 1928. Now, the reason that this podcast is kind of moving a lot quicker is because of the actual amount of resources there are to analyse every game. The normal format that we have, the painstaking format that I personally have, is to go through every single game that a player has ever played, and that's done by opening every single possible game that Celtic played during their career, whoever it was. Whereas with this one, the resources are more limited. It's more limited to articles and things like that, as opposed to like match reports. So this is why we're generalising, but we're trying to make the point that we're trying to like showcase the iconic status that John Thomson has, and we're trying to like prove the research has proven that this is deserved. However, I'm going to continue, and you can decide for yourself at the end. There's one massive result, January 1928. Here we go. What was the score? January 1928. Against Dunfermline.
Well, I'm gonna guess something daft. 5-6, 7-2, 7. I don't know, 9-12. I don't know.
9-0. Guess how many James McGrory scored?
1.
James McGrory scored 8 goals.
Fucking hell.
8. I repeat, this is not a typo, an audio typo. James McGrory scored 8 goals, and Alec Thompson scored the other, 9-0, January 14th, 1928. So, this isn't a Jimmy McGrory podcast. One day it will be. Basically, Celtic played 44 games that season, and McGrory played in 43. How many goals did he score that season?
Well, he had a knack. I'm pretty sure he scored more goals in games he played, so it's probably over that. 46, 45.
No, he scored. Yeah, he did actually. Sorry, he played. Celtic played 44. McGrory played 43, and he scored 53. And he had this kind of knack, as you say, like scoring in bundles. I think I actually systematically went through the book that I have and looked at every single result in my book, and he never scored in, I think, 15 games that season. but still managed to score 53 goals.
So I mean, you say we should be doing these podcasts. So basically, making it McGrory to be the 20s Chris Boyd.
That's a wee bit. Mate, I'm going to need to cut that out, mate. That's just a bit. I want to just I've got this really pixelated, fuzzy, grainy newspaper article that I can't even read the text, but I can read the headlines. The headlines go: McGrory sets up a new goal record. Rat-a-tat-tat scoring. Celtic's centre's greatest day. Glasgow's big toe. And then it goes on to mention something about the Huns and some other people. But rat-a-tat-tat scoring Celtic's centre's greatest day. 8 goals. An absolute phenomenon. So, as I say, he likes to score goals in bundles. So we played the Huns twice this season. The season 1927-28. 1 win, 1 loss. But our form, while it's quite steady for most of the season, falls away in April. And after, when it comes to, we win every single game in March. April is just a bit of a disaster for us. In the last 5 league games, we lose 3 and draw 1. The difference at the end of the season is only 5 points. So you can see that the month of April, which is actually the last month of the season. Back then, we play into May currently, 2017. Back then, April was the last month, and we just the arse fell away. We lost, and I've got some theories as to why that happened. So as I say, Rangers won the league by 5 points, 60 points to our 55. We also lost the Scottish Cup final 4-0 to Rangers. The whole season was a bit of a disaster. The last game of the season for Celtic, we lost 3-0 to Wraith Rovers on April 23rd. So I'm going to ask myself a question, and I'm going to answer myself a question. Feel free to jump in. What was the reason for the collapse and subsequent loss of the trophies? There were a lot of disciplinary issues within Celtic, namely a guy called Tommy McInally. His off-field antics, he apparently quite enjoyed the dancing. And his on-field behaviour, he was turning up to training, not bothering his arse, stroking around. I think he had a bit of a purple patch season this year before. We lost Patsy Gallagher a couple of years prior to this. He sort of stepped up, was excellent. This season that we're currently talking about, he never really delivered. And he kind of had a bit of an ego. So he ended up getting reprimanded by the SFA and get suspended by Celtic. Willie Maley was also posted missing. This took a lot of digging to find out why Celtic were doing shite, because I put it down to the reasons of the Tommy McInally thing, because he was kind of one of our key guys, and he was just fanning around and kept getting suspended. But Willie Maley was actually sick and missed quite a lot of games, so he wasn't even able to take training and stuff like that. But John Thomson, I think the most prominent thing that people know about Thomson is the incident where he died at Ibrox. But almost every single anecdote or quote mentions his ability as a goalkeeper. He had a genuine talent, and he was only 5'9" as well. He was not the tallest. With his wonderful, wonderful Celtic hair, he was probably taller. But just to emphasise, I want to give a quote from James Handley, his book The Celtic Story from 1960. Now this is a bit of prose, so I'm going to try my best to say it. So he says, "It's hard for those who did not know him to appreciate the power of the spell he cast on all who watched him regularly in action." In quotes, "A man who has not read Homer," wrote Baggio, and I hope I've pronounced that right, Baggio, not Roberto Baggio. I'm talking about the poet and writer Baggio. "A man who has not read Homer is like a man who has not seen the ocean. There is a great object of which he has no idea." End quotes. In like manner, a generation that did not see John Thomson, has missed a touch of greatness in sport, for which he was a brilliant virtuoso, as Geely was and Menuhin is. One artist employs the voice as his instrument, another the violin or cello. For Thomson, it was a handful of leather. We shall not look upon his like again. And breathe. Massive Storky inducing quotes there. Now that is absolutely fantastic writing there. That's from a guy called James Handley. The whole point of doing this is to emphasise that the iconic status that John Thomson has is thoroughly deserved, and hopefully by the end of this people will agree with us. I just want to talk about a wee famous story about James McGrory and Willie Maley making a pilgrimage to Lourdes. Have you heard about this? I
have not.
Right. James McGrory, Jimmy McGrory, Willie Maley, another guy, and some famous boxer were supposed to make a pilgrimage to Lourdes. But Celtic were flashing their wee bits to anyone that showed interest in any players. Celtic were trying their hardest to sell McGrory to Arsenal. Arsenal were the best team in England at the time, and Arsenal were offering apparently £2,000 to buy Jimmy McGrory. But Jimmy, I don't know if you know the anecdote, but Jimmy was like, I'm not going. It's cool, I don't want to leave. Whereas the Whites, who were in charge, were like, come on, fuck, go, we want the money. So Celtic were in this sort of mindset of just trying to sell people with any sort of money that was given them, like any sort of like bid that was coming their way that they thought was reasonable, they would take, and the player would be left to go without any sort of consultation. But McGrory was like steadfast. He's like, no, I don't want to go. I think there was some sort of rule where there was a limit to the amount that they could pay him, and he's like, if they pay me twice the legal amount, I'll go. But knowing fine well that they could not pay that because of the law, he's like, well, I can't go because it's, I want that money. So anyway, they go to Lourdes, but they're going via London. And when they get off the train in London, the guy that owns Arsenal's there, and like he picks him up, and Jimmy McGrory, where Willie Maley's like, what the fuck's going on here? So anyway, like they take him to a restaurant and all that, and Willie Maley's kind of unsure of what's going on as well. But I think he maybe had more of an idea than McGrory. So they go for a dinner, and then they go to Lourdes, spend a few days at Lourdes, do what they have to do. They come back to London, and sure enough, the guy from Arsenal's there again, and the guy from Arsenal follows them all the way back up to Glasgow, and then eventually admits defeat. And I'd imagine that the Whites were pretty fucking pissed off. So yeah, Celtic were quite prone to sort of lifting their skirt to like a wee cat in heat, like showing themselves to people anytime someone sort of showed an interest. I'm going to fast forward to 1928-1929. We win the first 6 games of the new season, which includes a Glasgow Cup win over the Rangers. The deed Rangers. But St Mirren then, after a decent run, St Mirren just turn up and beat us 3-0 at Celtic Park to end the absolutely positive start. We win the Glasgow Cup 2-0 against Queen's Park in October, but our form is very sketchy throughout the season. Now, again, it's 1928-1929. The form is sketchy, and it's highlighted by the fact that Celtic finished the season. We finished the season second, but we finished the season behind Rangers by about 16 points. So there's a massive, massive gulf. There's only 1 point between us and Motherwell at the end of the season, but the Huns are way out in front. This was the Huns' decade, basically. They just ran riot. We were kind of in their shadow, although we did have Patsy Gallagher, Jimmy McGrory, we had Alec Thompson, John Thomson, the next days. However, we lose 9 league games in the league alone that season, which kind of highlights the fact that we weren't very good. John was still keeping in goal for Celtic, and he was required to be a hero on a regular basis. I just want to reiterate that his attributes were the fact that he was extremely courageous, very athletic, very agile, and just very intuitive in the box. He was a very good goalkeeper for Celtic, and his courage was never in question. We both know that playing football is quite a rough sport, but back then the game was rough and tough. Protection from referees was nowhere near the same. Like now, the referees almost are like the most protected player on the pitches. The ball was heavy back then. The players were men, like proper. The guys were, working men. And his agility and intuition and bravery just got him into all sorts of dodgy situations. Actually, a quote is when he was asked why on earth he took so many risks, he said, "I'm a goalkeeper. It's my job to never take my eyes off the ball." So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, you can even see it, usually in those kind of path type. It's always the cup finals as well, but the path kind of black and white videos. Constantly, whenever a keeper would catch the ball when he's going out to throw it out, it was fair game just to bump into him and so on. So I think what the quote kind of probably summed it up. It's just keepers were that's what they were expected to do at those times. And I think I read a quote from John Fallon, who was a keeper during the 60s, and he was just basically said that, well, you had to come out and protect yourself. Because referees would turn a blind eye just as a striker come up and just kicking you as you're about to throw the ball out. So yeah, you'd have had to have looked after yourself, and especially someone as young as Thompson would have been. I'm sure his card would have been marked by a few people as well.
He was brave to the point of fault, which we now know. There were other injuries in his career, which I'll get to, but Celtic, it was actually suggested in the books that stuck to a more traditional style of football in the mid to late 20s and never actually progressed from the style of football that happened. We know that football kind of goes in cycles, the whole Gegen pressing with the 4-4-2 to the diamond, the Christmas tree shape now. Now it's 4-2-3-1 and well, Rodgers is employing almost all of them with his fluid style of football, liquid football. But the style employed by others was a more defensive approach. But Celtic were kind of gung-ho and cavalier, which in turn left John very exposed and vulnerable. And I think this explains why we scored a lot of fucking goals, but we also conceded stupid amounts of goals as well. Now we can pinpoint, we can say, he's a goalkeeper, it's his job to stop goals. But if you're left with like 2 defenders for the majority of the game against maybe 4 attackers, which was kind of the way back then, 4 against 2 and then 1 goalkeeper, I think from what I learned and from what I gleaned from the research was that he kept Celtic, he kept the numbers down. I'd imagine the number of goals that we would have conceded would have been higher had we not had someone of his ability in the goals.
Well, yeah, just based on, and I don't want to be cruel, but the guy before him sounds a bit like a Haddy. So if it were him in goal, I reckon he could well be right.
Yeah. So. Yeah, in his entire career, I don't know if whoever's read this, whoever's reading this, has seen the banner on Twitter that we put on his clean sheets. He had 64 clean sheets in his career. He was 22 when he died, 64 clean sheets, and he was a start. He played for Celtic. He was a starter for Celtic, a starter for Scotland, a starter for the league as well. The league, the team that the league would band together. I want to just give a little quote from another source here. If you give me one moment, I just need to make sure that this quote is legible. It's quite small, however. It's from John Kearney's Scottish Football Hall of Fame book. It said, "He had brightened grim days by his grace and thrilled plain people by his courage. His modesty and good looks endeared him to countless thousands who had never met him. This slim custodian, armed only with a pair of gloves and a cap against marauding forwards in heavy boots, and all fighting for a leather ball that grew heavier in the mud and rain. He was required to be a hero on a regular basis. Now he was gone as the result of a kneecap blow to the temple." So obviously I'm skipping ahead to the incident, but that kind of gives you an idea of the sort of impact and the sort of talent and attributes and ability that he had and brought to Celtic. So just to round off this season, John plays 43 out of 44 games that were possible. Considering the fact he was the guy was brave to the point of, John, have a word, mate, to the point where he was putting himself in situations that were getting him injured. He was actually injured. I came across some injuries that he had when, playing football was to stop the ball going in the net and to get the ball and to a fault. And he put himself into situations where he ended up with a double fracture of the collarbone, a broken jaw, concussion, and he lost his 2 front teeth. The guy was in it to win it. I think that's kind of encroaching on your period. It was difficult to pinpoint the exact games where he came across these very, very serious injuries, but some of them were in my time, some of them in your time, but that's fine. Just one last significant date before I wrap up my side of things here was the Celtic Park. There was a fire on March 28th, 1929. Many records from the earlier, we're talking earlier Celtic, this is earlier Celtic, so the earlier from the birth of Celtic were lost, like football boot strips, records, things like that, were lost in this disaster. So Celtic then had to play their games somewhere else. Any idea where Celtic had to then move to?
No, that's something that I'd never even heard of. I'm going to say Cathkin Park.
No, that's a good shout. It was actually Shawfield Stadium. I can't confirm if the Dugs were there at that point, but Celtic moved and played. I think we actually played 4 games at Shawfield. We won 2 and we lost 2, so not great. For me, Shawfield was always synonymous with going to Celtic Park as a wee boy, growing up and living in the south side. Grew up in Castlemilk, started in Castlemilk, then Kings Park, then Shawlands. Always had to go from the south side, either the Gorbals. Sometimes I got rather good Main Street, but a lot of the time I would be going up from Shawlands and Kings Park and other places in the south side with my pals or whatever, and we'd go past Shawfield. So that's an absolute synonymous place for me, and I didn't realise that Celtic had played there, which is even cooler. But I'll move on. So just to finish off, McGrory scored 31 goals this season. Celtic finished second, as I say, 16 points behind the Huns. And the last time that we won a league was the 25-26 season, which is the year before I started talking about. And it's not going to get any better when you take over. I know that, because I've done the research for your part as well, to an extent. We scored 67 goals this season, which is 26 less than the seasons before. And in this decade that we're talking about, the Huns win 8 out of 10, which leads us up to 1929, 1930, Gary.
Okay, so yeah, going into 29-30, and as you've kind of alluded to as well, it just kind of seems a lot more of the same. Celtic are one of the stronger teams of the era. They've got a lot of the best players in the league, and players like McGrory and whatnot, and Thomson. But we just seem to still, the Huns just seem dominant at this time. So the 29-30 season, we finished 11 points from the top. We finished in 4th place. So it's not quite a vintage season. We can see just over a goal a game, which is fairly standard for the time. We scored just over 2 goals a game. McGrory's once more a top goal scorer with 35 in all competitions. We get knocked out of the Scottish Cup in the 3rd round, and the Huns win the league. In terms of actual Thomson himself, he plays 31 games this season because he holds a very weird stat, and the fact that he suffers concussions in 2 consecutive games. So again, the question I pose about that is that, do you think this is perhaps symptomatic of his style? It's a bit of a horrible premonition when we know what's coming up next. So yeah, the 2 games it's a 1-1 draw with Kelly in December, where he, from what I can imagine, he jumps down at the feet of a player and suffers a concussion. And the same thing happens the week after in a 3-1 win over Hearts. This is one of those seasons where Celtic kind of bundle along a little bit until February. We kind of had a good run of form towards the end of the season, just after we get knocked out of the Cup, so we've got nothing to play for. So I think the pressure just kind of goes off the team. And we managed to keep 8 clean sheets in the last 11 games. So I think this could be a way of saying that it gives hope for the next season. We consider perhaps Thompson settling into his role, perhaps the team's a little bit more settled. Who knows? I'm just going to glide right over that season into the next one. It's a lot better. So I'm just going to kind of glide over that season because it's not a vintage season. It's even for the era that we're in, which is not the most successful era of Celtic's history.
Celtic don't win anything that season.
They don't know. Knocked out the Cup in the 3rd round. The Huns win the league, finishing 4th place. It's just not really a vintage season. Yeah. One thing of note though for Thomson is that this is at the end of this season, in an international challenge match, he gets his first cap for Scotland in a 2-0 away win over France. So you can see, we can kind of surmise from this that he's kind of making waves, and he's been capped for his country at a very young age. So he's seen as, if not the top, then one of the top goalkeepers of the time for Scotland. So moving on into the 30-31 season, it's a lot better performance as a team. We finished 2 points from the top in 2nd place once more for those pesky Huns. But it's a lot more solid across the board. We can see just under a goal a game, so we can see that if you're looking at trends and so on, then defensively we're looking a bit better, and obviously Thomson would have been a big part of that. It's another season where we scored a lot of goals. We scored just under 3 goals a game, which is a fantastic return. McGrory's our top goal scorer again with 44 in all competitions, but as I say, we're pipped at the end, 2 points away from the Huns, so kind of one win away. So he plays 43 games. He's a virtual ever present in this season. Looking at the kind of stats, 1 in 3 of the games we keep a clean sheet, which I think for the time that we're in is a very good return.
Is that a question for me?
I was leaving it open.
Right. No, it is, and this is kind of where he starts to pick up his the record of the 64 clean sheets in the amount of games that he plays. Now, I don't have immediately this precise second the amount of games that he did play for Celtic, but by the time that you've finished with your section of the podcast, I'll have the exact amount of games that he played for Celtic. But yeah, this is kind of when he is becoming more recognised out with Celtic, and he, as you say, is getting recognised by the national team and also the league. So yeah.
Yeah, and so this is the season we reached the Scottish Cup final and we play Motherwell, who, from what I can see, are actually a very good team at the time. They're always kind of there or thereabouts, and they'll actually go on to win the league in the next season. So we won the Scottish Cup, but it was after a replay. The first game was a 2-2 draw that we kind of had to fight back. We were 2-0 down. Going into the replay. And I have a newspaper report here which I'm going to read a little bit from. Certainly Thomson. This is not Johnny Thomson. Alec Thomson and McGrory were on the spot to place the ball in net as the opportunities arose. The former scoring goals in the 9th and 34th minute, and McGrory scoring one in the 30th minute. But it was extraordinary to see a goalkeeper of the ability and experience of McClory, who's the Motherwell keeper, repeatedly misjudged the flight of balls sent in on him. He and Hunter, the Motherwell left back, seemed to have a misunderstanding when the third goal was scored, either being in a good position to clear the danger. But in the case of the first and second goals, it was undoubtedly the custodian who was at fault. He came out to meet balls from the right wing, and each time advanced too far and left, making scoring an easy matter for the alert Celtic forwards. So we're 3-0 up in the Scottish Cup final rather, because their keeper's kind of having a mare. So in true Celtic fashion, we decided to kind of copy that as well. And I continue. Strangely enough, the goal obtained by Motherwell before the interval was made possible by an error of judgment on the part of Johnny Thomson, Celtic's international goalkeeper, who ran out to meet the ball as it came over from a corner kick by Ferrier. He also misjudged the ball's flight and missed it completely, leaving Murdoch an easy task to score from close range. So this is kind of one of the biggest games of his career, and he does, we shouldn't gloss over these things. He does make a mistake, but it's not very costly because luckily for him, the other keeper's having even more of a mare, and we go on to win 4-2 here. So we can see, and it's also in this year where he's beginning to kind of establish himself as Scotland's number one. We can see that by the fact that in our kind of the British International Championships, which I'd imagine is a kind of precursor to the home internationals and whatnot, he plays in three of those against Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. So he seems to be the number one choice at this time. So he is in goals for a 2-0 win over England. We have a 0-0 draw with Northern Ireland and a 1-0 draw with Wales. So of three of his four international games, he kept a clean sheet. Not a bad record to have.
I should also add, Gary, how old is he? 22? 21? 20?
I believe he's 22 at this point. If we're talking kind of mid-1931, I don't know exactly when his birthday is, but he's on the cusp of turning 22.
He was born on 2 seconds. I've got it right here. January 28th, 1909.
1909. So he would be 22 at this point, yeah.
This is now the final year of his life. And this is when we're going to move into the 1931-1932 season, which is the season that's kind of, resonates within Celtic's history.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly go up to the moment because the moment while I was speaking about him and so on happens fairly early in the season. So I'll just kind of speak up to kind of what Celtic were doing up until that point. It's in the summer that we take a tour of North America. This is a long-held ambition for the club, and I think it's the first time that we actually done it. But it was to become a bit of a fixture, including even in the Lisbon season. The directors and whatnot obviously like the kind of chance to go test ourselves against teams across North America. Well, yeah, and obviously have a bit of a jolly up as well, I'm sure. So yeah, we took a sea voyage there and back for a total of 13 fixtures, This was played over a 6-week period. So the Celtic party landed in New York and visited such cities as Montreal, Toronto, Philadelphia and Chicago. Their opposition included the New York Yankees, the New York Giants, the Michigan All-Stars, Pawtucket Rangers and Ulster United, which I'm sure was a lovely affair. Celtic won 9, lost 3 and drew one of their matches, scoring 48 goals and conceding 18.
So just to clarify, Celtic played the New York Yankees. I'm going to, obviously, we're talking 100 years, literally almost 100 years ago. They played against the teams, the Yankees, as a football team, yeah?
Yeah.
That's something that we need to do, dig in and find more information about these games, because that alone itself is something that we should know.
Mm-hmm.
Not know, but I'm very intrigued to find out how that came about, who we actually played, and if it was any association to the New York Yankees. Yeah,
I mean, they murdered us at baseball, but we smashed them at football, so win-win. So I mean, kind of skirting around it. So we just need to get to the point that most people tend to know Johnny Thomson from. It's the 5th of September. I think Celtic have a pretty good start to the season. And we go to Ibrox to play Rangers in front of a record crowd for the season, which is 80,000. From the reports I can see of the game, it was a fairly scrappy one. We both teams were happy just to leave it to a kind of physical battle, like a lot of these type of games tended to be. No quarter given or asked. So there wasn't much in terms of chances so on until kind of early on in the second half when the ball came through. I'm sure we've all seen the footage and so on. It's one of those ones where if you see it in picture form, it actually looks worse, I think, because you can actually see what had happened. With the kind of quality of the video, when the ball comes through, Sam English goes to get the ball, and John Thomson he kind of hesitates for a little bit, and this obviously has tragic consequences, because when he did kind of jump down to get the ball, he was just kind of a fraction too late. Sam English managed to nick the ball beyond him, and Sam English's left knee went into the head of Johnny Thomson. And if you see it in the kind of British Path footage, there's a little flicker, like a little moment where the video kind of cuts a little bit, so you don't quite see the full impact, which is probably a good thing. But you just kind of see the aftermath of that. Have you seen the footage yourself?
Yeah, I watched the footage. I've seen it before, but I watched it again today. I'm not a big fan of watching any sort of morbid videos, and that for me is a morbid video. You see the impact, and the footage of the match is available to watch online, but it's not something I like to watch. And when you see it, it's clear from the first second that he goes down, you know that something is seriously wrong, and then obviously the rest is history. And the guy. So you want to tell us? Do you have any information about the guy that actually was the guy who made the challenge?
Yes, Sam English. Yeah. I'm gonna kind of finish on that because that's kind of a story in itself. But I just kind of want to give a little bit from a report of the time. It said Thompson's head collided with English's knee, fracturing his skull and rupturing an artery in his right temple. Thomson was taken off the field in a stretcher. Most people assumed that he was just badly concussed, but a few people who had seen his injuries suspected worse. One source says there were gasps in the main stand, a single piercing scream being heard from a horrified young woman. And if you watch the footage, you can hear this very, very distinctly. And this was believed to be the scream of 19-year-old Margaret Finlay, who was watching with Jim Thomson, brother of John. And I believe Margaret Finlay was actually his fiancée. Yes, so he'd only recently got engaged to her, and he started making plans to open a tailor shop in Glasgow. Obviously it was a horrific thing for anyone to see, but especially someone that you're planning to spend the rest of your life with. It should be said one Rangers player, who was also a medical student, said later that as soon as he saw him, he gave little chance for his survival. So, and this kind of corroborates when you see the footage of the aftermath and so on, and you kind of read some of the reports, you see that the crowd, and I don't think you can really blame the crowd as such, because obviously when we've all been at football games when a player's been down injured, and it's customary just to kind of jeer them, and kind of tell them to get on with the game. But the Rangers captain at the time, who's obviously very, very close to the incident, his name was David Meikle-John. He actually went up to the Rangers fans and kind of placated them and said, "No, listen, this is serious. Kind of stop." So I think the players on the park knew how serious that this actually was.
Yeah, there's very few moments of unity between fans of our fans and their fans, and obviously the old club, the Celtic. And there's moments that kind of, I don't want to sound like a cheese dick, that kind of transcend, the Tony Burns thing. But from what I learned, the way that Rangers handled the situation with that was very like they couldn't have been any better with regards to the way that things were handled, and the way that they looked after John's parents. Like they sent a car up to collect him and stuff like that. And reading about it doesn't change my feelings that I think they're all absolute bastards. However, when you read that, it's just kind of, I don't know. It's not what I expected. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, in moments like that, I think, as you say, they do transcend, and they should transcend. I mean, it's a matter of life or death here, and I saw, as part of my research, I saw a kind of very poignant picture of the Rangers manager Bill Struth and Willie Maley both on the field, just kind of looking over. I think it was genuinely everyone understood the seriousness of the incident right away, especially those who were close to it. Just to give a little bit of, just to kind of close, obviously, the game off. After having treatment from the St Andrews Ambulance Association, he was taken to a stretcher. He was seen to rise from the stretcher and look towards the goal and the spot where the incident happened. So the game just kind of played out after this, and it finished 0-0. Thomson was taken to the Victoria Infirmary in Glasgow. He had a lacerated wound over his right parietal bones of the skull, which meant that there was a depression in his skull of 2 inches, so 5 centimetres in diameter. At 5 p.m, he suffered a major convulsion. Dr. Norman Davison carried out an emergency operation to try and lower the amount of pressure caused by the swelling brain, but the operation was unsuccessful and he was pronounced dead by 9:25 p.m.
The ironic thing was that I actually read that when he moved from Fife to Glasgow, he actually lived on 481 Victoria Road. Now, I'm from the south side. I've kind of lived there, apart from living in various countries, whatever. I've always lived in the south side. So for me, like, he's lived in an area where I grew up, 481 Victoria Road. For those that don't know, at the time of his death, he lived, we're talking 400 metres from the hospital, maybe half a kilometre, I don't know what that is in miles, but half a kilometre just round the bend of Queen's Park. It's basically next to Barnardo's on Victoria Road, which is across the road from the old Tyrconnell. It's kind of next to the Queen's Park Cafe, the ice cream place, but also the Queen's Park Cafe, the boozer, very close to that. And the guy Sam English, who I don't know if there was a book or an article, but I saw it online. It was called The Haunted Man, and he never really recovered from that. He was an innocent party, the Rangers player. Gilly, one of the guys who's involved with the podcast, his grandfather worked with him and played football with him way in the past, and said that he was a lovely guy, and he had a lot of time for everybody. I'm talking about Sam English here. Socialised with him on a few occasions. He felt it was a real sore point for Sam English, and as I say, he never recovered. But Gilly's grandfather thought he was a genuine gentleman. Gilly's granddad was a massive Tim growing up. But yeah, like it just a very, and also I think this is one of the first occasions of a player dying on the pitch. Now we're talking about post-war players would have died during the war, but to die on the pitch was something extremely unusual. So the significance of that as well was tied in And even now, the reverberations of that are kind of still felt now. Hence the podcast.
Yeah, I mean and I really wanted to touch on the Sam English part of it because I think it's very, very important to focus on that because you just had a man who was just doing his job, and he just happened to have been involved in one of the most horrible incidents that you could probably have on a football field. And I kind of want to focus a little bit on that because uh, this is a thing that I'm not sure if the feeling of the time or the emotions kind of got to him, but perhaps I've been too kind to him. But when asked about it in the inquest, Willie Milley was asked, "Do you think it was an accident?" And he just answered, "Well, I hope so," which, based on what we can see and subsequently what we know about the man, I think was a pretty cheap thing to say at that time.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Like, I watched reports in there was a thing on BBC News about John Thomson. He got inducted into the Scottish Football Hall of Fame in 2008, and it was about that. It made the news, and it showed you the medical records and the person that had written the medical records at the time. The doctor had said, it was a complete accident. The way that things happened, it was just like a split second decision, kind of changed the life of many, many people. But yeah, I did come across that with that Santa Claus. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a. I don't really know what Willie Mealy was thinking, to be honest, when he made that comment. I'd like to think it was a genuinely an honest comment, but it does have the connotations of being quite unsavoury, because it was a split second decision that sort of changed everything. And the report suggests that it was just like a complete accident that had devastating effects for many, many, many people involved. But anything else that you want to add? There's some quotes that we want to add, but anything else you want to add about the actual incident, or are we going to move on?
Just to kind of finish on the kind of Sam English part, and again, just as a kind of personal kind of verification of I think what his character was. He was quoted as because the thing was he scored 53 goals that season, which is still I think to this day is the highest for the Huns, dead or living. Any of the actual it's the highest goals scored by one person in one season. But he eventually moved to Liverpool and then ended up back up. He just kind of had a bit of a nomadic career after that season. And he eventually gave up football at the age of 28 and was quoted afterwards as describing his playing career after the Thomson incident as being 7 years of joyless sport. So based on what we've heard, I think we can completely give him the benefit of the doubt about this. And it's sad, basically, that kind of almost two careers ended on that day as well.
Yeah, the term that I used that I came across the description was a haunted man, and that thing sort of lives with you. I think he died quite young as well, but so yeah, obviously John Thomson. I've got a couple of little quotes here that I would like to add if you just to finish off here. So we know that John Thomson, as a Celtic player, he played. I've got the exact amount of games here to hand. He played 188 games with 64 clean sheets, which is an amazing return. He was only 22. He played 4 or 5 games for Scotland. He was the recognised Scottish number one. The team at the time, obviously having Jimmy McGrory is something, but we were up against a really strong Rangers. Is there anything you want to add before I'm going to finish with a specific quote here. I'm building it up, Gary. I'm building it up.
Yeah, well, basically for me, it's just been the kind of journey of looking at him and seeing that he actually did have a career worthy of the name, and that he isn't just an icon because he died young and he was a good looking guy for the time. That he actually merits being mentioned among the greats of this club.
Yeah, and I do hope that we've relayed just how important and revered this guy was and is for Celtic. It's quite a sensitive one. I don't think we've really done one as sensitive as this before, but it's good to try and talk about these things and let people know who these guys are. Before doing this, I didn't really know much, and this is why I enjoyed doing it. He was supposed to be quite a mild-mannered, quiet gentleman, but he would pour his heart out on the pitch for Celtic. So the last thing I want to say before we finish for John Thomson, we are going to continue after the music with a review of the Motherwell game. It's currently nearly 2 o'clock in the morning in Spain, and you're in Colombia, so it's the night before on the Friday. But his epitaph is quite poignant, and it simply reads, "They never die who live in the hearts they leave behind." For me, that's the nicest thing that could be on anyone's epitaph. But I think that you've got something that you would like to add before we finish.
Yeah, well, two things, something along those lines. It's just I think we should include what his manager said about him. So Willie Maley said, obviously after he'd passed on, was, "Never was there a keeper who caught and held the fastest shots with such grace and ease. In all he did, there was the balance and beauty of movement wonderful to watch." And I'd also like to add the one quote we actually managed to get from him. This is a conversation he had with Jimmy McGrory. And this is about being called a Fenian bastard by an opposition player, despite the fact that Thomson himself is actually a church-going Protestant. Jim McGrory said, "John, I get called that every game I play." And John replied, "I know, it's all right for you. You are one."
Well, a young man named John Thomson, from the Wells near Fife he came, played for Glasgow Celtic, and to build himself a name. On the 5th day of September, against the Rangers club he played. From defeat he saved the Celtic. Ah, but what a price he paid. The ball rolls on centre too, but John runs out and dies. The ball rolls by, but John lies still, for his club, his hero died. The fans, they all are silent as they travel near and far. No more they'll cheer John Thomson, that bright and shining star. So play up in Glasgow Celtic, stand up and play the game, for in you goal our spirit stands. John Thomson is his name. I took a trip to Parkhead, to the dear old paradise, and as the players came out, sure the tears fell from my eyes, for a famous face was missing from the green and white brigade. And they told me Johnny Thomson is the last game he had played. Farewell, my darling Johnny, Prince of players, we must part. No more we'll stand and cheer you on the slopes of Celtic Park. No more we'll stand and cheer you on the slopes of Celtic.
So if you've made it this far on the History Boys Abroad, I want to apologise now for the audio quality of the John Thomson file, because halfway through it we had some issues that were not quite evident until the very, very end, and listening in playback. So apologies for the poor quality. I tried to fix it the best I could, and hopefully you've got something from that. But we just want to wrap up today's podcast, or this podcast, speaking to Liam. Hello, Liam.
All right, Tony, how's it going?
Good, mate. So we just want to talk about the game against the Steelmen, the Hammer Throwers, Motherwell today, 2-0. For me, it felt like a bit of a formality. What do you think?
Well, they're probably the team that's gave us the toughest couple of games so far in the season. But after them getting turned over 7-2 midweek, I was pretty optimistic that we were going to score at least 5.
Nah, I think the toughest team that we've faced this season on a consistent basis has been St Johnstone.
I suppose that's true as well. They have played well against us.
Yeah. So we started today's lineup with the same team as last week, as you pointed out, except Suminovic came in for Sviatchenko. Sviatchenko's on the bench. The bench was actually quite interesting. There was no recognised striker on the bench. Izagiri, Gamboa, Armstrong was back, Mackay-Steven, who's there just to make up the numbers, really, De Vries, Sviatchenko and McGregor. So I just want to ask you a few questions. The first half, I know we scored the 2 goals in the first half, but for the first half an hour, for me, it was pretty pedestrian, pretty boring. What did you think?
I felt as though the players, for the first time this season, that they've kind of just turned up and thought that they would win. They didn't seem to be like that urgency that they've had. And there was throughout the whole course of the game, there was a lot of slack passing, which is something I've not noted the whole season.
I think though there's going to be games like this where things are flatter than other games, than previous games. We've also had a week in between games, and we've got another week in between games. But I don't know why I'm saying that, but I'm just saying that anyway. But we have had more time in between games. I don't know if that's creating like lack of sharpness or something, but it's just the way things are. The way things are. Games are going to be like this. They're going to be flat games now and again. But like some of the passing was a bit. Like Beaton was very, very wasteful for me. Your dog's snoring again, mate. You're at it. Your dog is snoring again.
She's lying on the floor beside me.
Right, so your dog is making a cameo on a podcast. Does your dog know? What's your dog's name? So
Lila.
Lila. Tell her to shut it. So I think ask her about Beaton's hairdo, will you? Ask her what she thinks about Beaton's bronze barnet. But I thought Beaton, while he saw a lot of the ball, I thought he was quite wasteful with his passing. Some of his passing is just so relaxed, and quite often today he was just passing the ball to Motherwell or just passing out the pitch. I never thought his passing was up too much. And there was a bit of chat online that Beaton had his best game today, and then in the next post on the huddle board, people were saying, nah, he was fucking shite. What did you think of Beaton?
I thought he was Beaton. I thought he was more aggressive today, and he did have nice touches, he had a few nice passes, but then, as you said, the next one was out the park or straight to a Motherwell player, but I don't think he was the only person that was capable of doing that today. Boyata, Sinclair, Dembele, Armstrong, Brown, there was, I think pretty much every person on the park at some point had a stray pass or a pass going straight to a Motherwell player.
I think so. I think Sinclair had his quietest game for us. He had that amazing that run that you'll remember when he beat 2 players quite comfortably. But apart from that, there was not like his usual incisiveness on the ball. There wasn't his usual. I don't know, he just seemed to like drift in and out of the game, and he seemed to be getting a little bit frustrated by it in the end. There was a couple of times when he could have been played in by Dembele and Dembele chose to shoot, but even Dembele today he was quite good. He scores a goal, but it just felt like today's one of those games that, you know, further down the line, like in a couple of weeks' time you're going to forget all about this game. But I want to ask you about Henderson. That's him played like 2 or 3 games now.
Right.
So what do you think of Henderson? He's playing in the position where Tom Rogic should be playing. I have my own opinion on him. So what do you think?
Before the game, Rodgers got interviewed. I don't know if you heard it. It was on BBC Radio Scotland. And right, they were just asking about the lineup, saying how, and they obviously spoke about Henderson, and he says, yeah, He says I've been able to give him a run of games to see how he's going to perform, and then I'll be able to decide what I'm going to do with him in the summer. So to me, that's him saying, yeah, this is his last chance to prove to me before I ship him out. And today he was ineffective. Nothing happened for him, and then getting hooked after 45 minutes says a lot.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of nice little touches here and there, but there's just not really much. It is difficult for someone to come in and make a stamp on a team that's playing so well. I think the fact that Rogic is injured and then Armstrong get injured has just opened that door for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be playing. And obviously, Armstrong comes on and then goes straight to behind the front, behind Dembele. Armstrong was quiet, but he's coming back from injury. But I just thought Henderson, it just seems like, I don't know, he just doesn't seem like he's good enough to fit in with this team. I mean, I might be being harsh, but I just don't think that he's good enough to continue with Celtic. But one player that I slagged last week, and I'm just going to take it back because, first of all, he got 3 assists last week, which I never even noticed. And his name's James Forrest, and he scored today, and he should have got man of the match. He never got it. It was the stadium man of the match was Dembele. Yeah. But I thought Forrest was great. I think that's probably the best I've seen Forrest since the start of the season. He's went through quite a large period of anonymity, but what did you think of Forrest? I
thought Forrest played really well today. He took his goal really well, and that's something I like to see more from him. He's got the ability to get past players, and he is quite accurate with his shooting when he does decide that he's going to have a goal. So I don't know, it's something he needs to obviously have more faith in himself, I think, rather than the disbelief that I think he's a confidence player, obviously, and a big part of me feels as though if he believes he's the best player in the world, then that's what you're going to get out of him. It's that performance like last week and a performance today.
So I just want to point out, he hit a shot today that went out for a throw-in.
I forgot about that, and now you mentioned
it. One thing that I really liked about the build-up to his goal today is that Dembele's pass to him, the pass was so fast, like the ball was whipped out so fast that the camera couldn't even keep up with the ball, and then he beats 2 or 3 men and rifles it into the corner. And I like the way the ball sort of rolls up into the roof of the net. It always looks much better, but that's the best I've seen Forrest for a while, and it's good that he's kind of finding this bit of form now. Like he's finding his form again, because Patrick Roberts, that I learned today, he's out with I think it's a hamstring injury.
I was wondering why he wasn't on the bench.
So basically, I don't know if you saw it this week, but on Celtic TV there was an interview with the head of sports science or something like that, the head of medical development at Celtic. It's a guy called Glenn Driscoll. He basically got asked. I just want to say something right now. Fran Sandaza is on my TV.
Really?
Fran Sandaza is on my TV. Aye, he's playing for.
I thought he was dead.
I thought he was dead as well. A skiing accident or something like that. No, he's fully alive, and he's playing for Girona, the team from Catalonia. Anyway, so Glenn Driscoll gave a bit of an insight to the development of players when they're injured. He basically said that Rogic is out for the season. He said that Rogic has picked up this injury, and it was worse than they expected. But now they said we're going to give Rogic more of an off season now. That was the terms that he used. And then he said because he's got the Confederations Cup in the summer for Australia, we're going to let him recuperate for that. So that I took that as Rogic is going to be out for the rest of the season, pretty much. He also said that he called it efficient clinical management. Like when Kieran Tierney got that injury, that ankle injury, Glenn Driscoll basically said that because he had an ankle injury, he was only supposed to be out for 4 weeks, but he was also carrying a long-term shoulder injury, so they thought, why not just get the shoulder operated on to sort of save time, because he's going to need that done further down the line, hence why Itakiri came in, hence why he was out for 2 months. Speaking of Kieran Tierney and injuries, I don't imagine that have you seen it since the tackle?
I've not seen the replay, no, but my uncle, he was sitting, obviously, main stand, and he says all he heard was a thud. I didn't hear that for obviously North Stand, but he's like, he says you'd have heard that thud. He's like, says that as a career ender.
Yeah, and it was. I'm not a fan of watching. You get people are quite into watching gory ankle breaks and injury videos. I can't do it. So when it you're watching it and you didn't really see the contact, but then he showed you the replay, but you knew straight away something was wrong because the way he sort of crumpled and then put his hand in the air like as if to say help, help. I didn't really watch it, but apparently his foot was off the ground at the time of contact, which sort of means that had his foot been solid on the ground, he probably would have broke his leg, and he had blood all over his leg, and he was down for quite some time. I don't know if you saw this as well. I don't know what time you left the game, but he was like Kieran Tierney. After that, was also on the referee's case, asking why is it a yellow? See at full time, Tierney was up at the referee, like questioning him.
I stayed to the end, but I didn't know going over at the referee.
Yeah, he went up to the referee and was basically having a go at him, which is quite good to see. But I don't know how the referee can defend that. It was, I mean, the guy's got blood streaming from his knee, and it was a high tackle, and it was reckless. He was nowhere near the ball. I've no idea. It wasn't even a dirty game either.
No, it wasn't. Like Motherwell obviously set up to try and frustrate Celtic and hit them on the break, and they got a few chances. But I even thought there wasn't a lot of fouls in it. The referee had much to do, but that was obviously it was our side for me, so I couldn't quite see it in full detail. But I knew it was high, and I knew it was late. Yeah.
High and late. That's exactly what it was, and the guy should have been sent off. And there's not going to be any sort of retrospective.
So he can't get any further punishment.
Yeah, retrospective punishment, which is just it's just really really stupid. I really hope that the club someone from the club mentions it in the press or something is done, because the consensus from like social media and stuff like that and like forums is that people are absolutely fucking raging with it, because it was it was really really heavy. So the other thing that this Glenn Driscoll guy was saying was that, you know, with Jozo coming in and out, and Jozo looked okay today. Quite an easy game, I suppose, but he says that the problem, you know, Jozo's in and out, he says the problem's not his knees anymore. He says his knees are fine, he's actually just carrying like a shoulder injury, but he says his knees are strong enough and he's back to full fitness more or less. So like I'm quite enjoying, I don't know if you've got access to Celtic TV at any level, but you get to see all these like interviews. They had one with Stevie Woods last week and one with this Glenn Driscoll, and he really really opened up, so it's quite good. He says that Lee Griffiths is injured as well, but he should be coming back soon. But so Dembele, another goal. Anything to add on Dembele, or is it just the way it is?
I think if he only scores one goal these days, it's a bit of a disappointment.
Aye, there was a lot of chat about scoring, a hat trick, try to get the hat trick, and he had quite a few chances in the end, and he probably should have scored one.
From his performance today, I think he had in his head that he's wanting a hat trick, because as you noted earlier on, he was like pretty greedy at times. I think there was a breakaway where it was like him, Sinclair and Forrest, and the two defenders had ran to Dembele, and if he had played in Sinclair or Forrest through the second half, they played in Sinclair or Forrest, they were 1-1 with the keeper, and he went for the shot and just pretty much booted it off the defender's chest.
Yeah.
Whereas I think previously he would have played the pass.
Yeah, he had that chance where Beaton beat about 3 men and then
that's right. I would
to him and just
Beaton made a wee bit of a Messi-esque
bust the pace. I know, where has he been hiding that? As we've said, he's the most relaxed guy in the pitch, but he's just found, and he actually nutmegged the guy as well, which was pretty cool. Before we wrap up here, a couple other questions. Boyata, what are you thinking about Boyata? I'm starting to think that he is going to be a long-term Celtic player, not necessarily a starter, certainly, but you know, everyone's suggested that he would be leaving in January, or if not, he'd be leaving in the summer. But I only noted one mistake today from him, and that's when he passed the ball directly to a Motherwell player. As you pointed out, a lot of Celtic players had the habit of doing that today. But apart from that, he just strolled through the game. He did. No, I don't think he's really been tested. So I think maybe if you go to Pittodrie, go to Tynecastle or Ibrox, then that's when he'll get tested. Like when he's up against it, when the crowd's a bit more hostile. So I don't think he's had that yet. If to say, he has recovered from the player he was last season. So he's still coming in.
But the other side of it is the fact that he's the one that's not been dropped.
Yeah.
So every other centre half's getting changed, and he's the one that's not getting changed. So obviously there's something there, and Rodgers obviously has a great belief in him.
Yeah. It's the Rodgers syndrome, isn't it? He's coming in and sort of rejuvenating players and putting an arm around them and telling them what they want to hear. Bitton, we spoke about Beaton. I'm sounding like the Celtic TV commentary team. They can't pronounce half. Fucking does my nutting, man. Beaton and Brown, they were much lamented in the past. There was a lot of chat they could never play together. Now that's them playing together on a regular basis. What do you think of the partnership between the two of them in the middle of the pitch?
I think it's starting to work pretty well. I thought, to be honest, with the exception of Forrest and Bailey, they were the two best players on the park.
Yeah, I thought Lustig was okay. He never done anything wrong.
Well, I suppose
Tierney and Lustig were fine. The defenders never had much to do, but I think the Beaton and Brown thing is kind of working out to be a bit better than it was anyway. Obviously, Brown has improved significantly, and maybe that's why the partnership's working more, because Brown is sort of carrying it a bit. But for me, I'm not really sure if Beaton's going to be the long term answer there. And Ibui played yesterday against Hibs. In a development squad. They were playing in like fucking some sort of indoor like sports centre, which was a bit bad.
Aye.
And there was a lot like Neil Lennon and Craig Levine and Ian Catherine. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of like big name football guys that were watching them within Scottish football anyway. But I'm intrigued to see when he's going to be brought into the squad. But it's good to have Armstrong back anyway. And as we have been saying, with missing certain players, we're still. The slump continues. We're still winning games quite comfortably. Today was very, very comfortable. And to be honest, I think I've said everything I want to say about it. Is there anything you want to add?
No, not at all.
How was the atmosphere?
Apart from Roger's comments at the end of the game.
What did he say?
About the pitch.
Oh yeah, that's right. What did he say then?
For weeks, I've been saying that the pitch is not up to the usual spec that usually previous years. Like the bit that linesman runs up and down right in front of me is just mud. It's just sheer mud. There's no grass or anything. And today, after the game, Rogers commented on it, saying that it'll be ripped up in the summer. And then he's obviously wanting to know how the hybrid pitches.
Yeah, it's like half grass, half.
Yes, that's
10G or whatever it is.
That's what he's wanting to get installed.
Yeah. No, there's been a lot of chat about that online as well. I don't see the pitch up close enough. So the pitch is going to be replaced. There was something else I can't seem to remember that was said this week. Wim Jansen, that's what it was. Wim Jansen. So the atmosphere at the stadium, like, give us a wee bit. I thought the atmosphere sounded really good today.
The game was really good. They were, but I thought Jansen would have been on to do the half-time draw, but no, they never even announced it was there. I know they put it on their Twitter feed, but that was the extent of it.
Yeah, normally when these guys are in Scotland and in Glasgow and they're at Celtic, they're there as guests and they're there basically to do the Paradise Windfall. So I would have thought that he was there to do that. They did interview him on Celtic TV as well.
Right.
I want to add, Stephen Craney was the guest on Celtic TV alongside the Bull Summer Harrow, and he's put a bit of beef on, and he has the worst beard I've ever seen. And I'm not talking about like the density of his beard. I'm talking about like, you know, that way when you, like I've had a beard for forever and ever. So anyway, that way when you would shave,
yes,
and you would shave your sideburns too high, and you'd need to, you would shave one side too high, and you'd end up going up and up and up.
I got you.
He's basically got the opposite with his beard. It's all his beard.
So he shaved it all the way down.
His beard starts like about at the start of his ear, and I'm like, surely that's a fucking typo. Surely that's a mistake. What the fuck is going on?
I know what you're on about. I've seen a few folk with beards and as if they've shaved it all the way down to halfway down their jawline, and you're like, the point of beards to cover your face.
Pure designer beards. But anyway, we'll be back next week on the podcast. So basically, I'm quite organised. I've been quite organised in the background here. You're not seeing it, but I'm being organised. So the next 3 or 4 pods have all been agreed. So the next podcast is going to be another Know Your History. We had Chris 1888 on last week, which was good. Lots of good feedback for that. Next week's one's going to be with Melly from the 20 Minute Tims. The following podcast that we're going to do for the regular History Boys Abroad is going to be Craig Bellamy. I think Gilly is going to be allowed out the house to join us for that one. He says he wants to come on, so hopefully he's available and he's not at another wedding or whatever the fuck he's doing. And then hopefully, I think the following Know Your History is going to be with Christian Wolf, the Norwegian 90-minute cynic guy. who's going to come on and talk about Norwegian. Well, he's going to come on and talk about his history, not necessarily Celtic history. So hopefully that's going to be quite an interesting one. But hopefully the John Thomson podcast has worked out and you've managed to hear it, because I was quite happy with how it panned out. Technical issues aside, like, it took a lot to get that one put together, because Gary's in Bogota. There's a massive time difference between me in Spain and him out there, but hopefully it works out. Hopefully you can hear it, and if not, I'm sorry, I do apologise. But anyway, so that's everything from me. Anything you want to add, Liam?
No, not at all.
Right, smashing. So we are at Bhoys Abroad, I think.
Is that at
Bhoys Abroad? I always get that mixed up between that and the Gmail. The Gmail is historyboys@gmail. So if you fancy giving us a tweet, giving us a message, giving us anything you want, just send us a tweet or a DM or whatever on the bold Twitter, and we'll speak to you soon. Hail, hail.